U dalšího dílu podcastu vás zdraví Dan
a Aiden. Dnešní epizodu budeme speciálně nahrávat v angličtině. Naším dnešním hostem totiž bude zakladatel a ředitel značky Captain Fawcett a také mimo jiné vášnivý motorkář Richie Finney.
Hi Richie, how did you get to Prague today?
Good afternoon. I actually got to Prague last night and I arrived on a motorcycle which I'd ridden from England.
From England, yeah. How many countries you have been on this trip?
Well, on this trip, this is part 3, leg 3. It's divided into 3 parts, and in total this trip will be 13 countries. And so far I've only ridden through France, Holland, Germany, Belgium, and now Czech Republic. But I have a lot more left to do.
Well, what's your next destination?
I should be in Vienna tomorrow, with any luck. And then from Vienna on to Budapest, Romania, Bulgaria to Sofia, and then back up through Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina. What's another place begun? Ljubljana, which is Slovenia, Italy. Then Italy, Zurich, Switzerland on to Germany, and Germany to Paris.
Well, a hell of a trip.
A hell of a trip.
How many kilometers is that in total?
If you go on the auto route, that's total kilometers is 8,000, which is basically 5,000 miles. But I won't. I like to take the long way round. It's not interesting to be riding on an auto route or an autobahn because it's the same in every country. What's really nice is to get into the narrow lanes. But sometimes I don't have time to do that.
You are an avid biker, and here in the Czech Republic there is something to be said about our motorcycle culture. Not only have we had several well-known motorcycle brands in the past, our current president is also a very keen biker. Do motorcycles have a background like that in the UK as well?
Yes, I mean, of course, I'm very familiar with the Czech Jawa motorcycles, which are, the root of speedway. I mean, absolutely still to this day. In England, where speedway is a bit of a dying passion, but there are still some clubs, and in the town I live has a well-known speedway club. Jawa is still the engine of choice. So you have a great heritage for your motorcycles. And likewise, England had an incredible history of motorcycles. I mean, motorcycles have been around, I suppose, for about 140, getting on for 150 years. But I think in England in the late 50s, early 60s, the Japanese bikes had started to be imported and they couldn't really compete. And most British bikes actually completely disappeared. And even now you will see bikes, using those old names. I think there's a BSA, for instance. I think that's made in India. Royal Enfield, of course, which is an old British brand, again is an Indian motorcycle now. Triumph, saved and by John Bloor, very famous, but I think that's manufactured in Thailand. So there is no, and somebody will kill me for this, but I think it's true to say that there is no British motorcycle industry per se. I mean, you've got people rebuilding Norton, that's about to come back and things like this, but it's no longer, nothing in this world is as it was.
Do you ever drive a car?
I do drive a car.
And is it more boring than a motorcycle?
Very boring. A car, I would use a car, and a car is pretty much A to B. If I need to carry lots of boxes, I'm going to a show or something. But there's something about 2 wheels, and there's a famous Harley Davidson quote, which I'll paraphrase here, which if I had to explain, you wouldn't understand. What I mean is, it's a bit like talking to somebody about taking acid. If you haven't taken acid, you can describe all the colours and all the feelings, but unless you've taken acid, and it's exactly the same with the motorcycle. If you haven't ridden a motorcycle, you don't know. But there's something incredibly freeing about the motorcycle. It's your sense. You're actually, with the road, with the smells. You're really kind of in touch.
On the other hand, it's very dangerous.
Everything. Life is dangerous. How many people do we know that have succumbed to some of the big sea or something? It's a life in itself. We are born to die, ultimately. And yes, it is dangerous, but we take our life in our hands every time we cross the road or get on an aeroplane. Who knows when our time is up? You have to drive carefully. You should learn to ride. I should say you should learn to ride carefully. You need to ride safely, and you need to treat every other person on the road as if they're going to do the most ridiculous thing, like suddenly turn left or turn right in front of you. So you should ride defensively. But if we lived our lives with not taking any risks at all, we would have a very, very boring life.
Have you ever been in a road accident on a bike?
I have been. I have quite a serious road injury. I have quite a serious shoulder injury, which occurred actually off-roading when I was off-roading in South Africa. But I have been in some accidents, and I have known some friends of mine, you know, some acquaintances and so forth, who have had fatal injuries. But that doesn't prevent you from riding motorcycles. So I think it's the wrong thing. You know, it's what our parents would say to us. You know, I remember one time building a custom motorcycle, which in the magazine, you know, the magazine you've seen them, doesn't matter whether it's cars or whatever, and they say, oh, this bit was made, the frame was made, the painting was done, the chrome was done, the whole list of people. And I'll never forget crediting this bike that had been built and sort of saying, I'd like to thank my girlfriend, whose phone number is no longer available, and my mother, who refused to let me have a motorcycle.
Well, can you tell us how many bikes have you owned?
Mm-hmm. I've owned probably 14 or 15 motorcycles, and I did sell 2, and I do regret that. So I still have 12.
Well, it's quite a number.
It's quite a number. But the thing is, I'm so busy. I mean, I don't have time really. This is really quite a sad, but it's the truth. You know, I developed Captain Fawcett in my kitchen about 14 years ago. And it's taken over pretty much every waking moment since then. I'm very passionate about what I do. And even if you run a business, then of course it even takes over some of your sleeping moments. You wake up in the middle of the night and you're thinking about this or thinking about that. So my passion for motorcycles, although I've ridden virtually everywhere in the world, apart from South America, has really taken a back seat. It's only very recently, now that I've got a general manager in, that I can actually spend a little bit more time. But I never take a vacation. I don't take a day off. I would do a thing every year called Barber's Ride, which raises money for Make-A-Wish, children who are terminally ill, and it sometimes relates to their family and siblings and things. And we've raised to date over £150,000 for Make-A-Wish. So we have an annual motorcycle ride. This last year was in Ireland, and I think the next year will actually be in Europe. And it's just anyone can join, doesn't matter what kind of bike you've got, and you raise money. So that is my kind of annual holiday, and even I'm one of the organisers and founders of that, so that's actually work. So this is the first year that I've been able to take out any time, and I think the total trip, these 23 countries, is going to take me altogether 10 weeks. I've done part 1, 2 weeks. I did the next part, which is 4 weeks, and now it's another 4 weeks now. But even then, it's a challenge. 8,000 kilometers, 13 countries in 30 days. I'm visiting customers, I'm visiting distributors. You know, I'm cementing relationships, I'm creating new business relationships, and of course there's huge amounts of social media.
You're going to try to get a Guinness World Record
no, I don't think
for most ambitious business trip.
Well, it's possibly. I mean, it is drawn the attention of, like, you know, the people who specialise in export, but I mean there's people who, you know, there's one guy, Nick Sanders, he's very famous for literally riding 1,000 miles a day, and he will go right from the tip of, you know, Anchorage right down to the point of Ushuaia in South America, and he won't stop. He'll sleep by the bike. So it's exciting, but it's a work project.
I have to say, I admire your energy.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, I'm 66, so I'm getting on a bit, but and some of the things ache. Some things don't work quite like they used to. That's an age thing. But I think age really is motivational. You know, I won't stop till I drop, but that's how I will go. I will drop one day.
What started 14 years ago in Richie's kitchen is now a blooming business covering mustache wax, after tattoo cream, and everything in between. You do actually even sell coffee. What's that for?
I think it's really, really rather interesting because there's a whole backstory to Captain Fawcett. It is a homage to the Victorian, Edwardian explorers of yesteryear. It's slightly, you know, taking the mickey, you know, the idea of 5 guys there, you know, Victorian guys, you know, sort of with their waxed moustaches, and they're surrounded by 5,000 or 6,000 hostiles, and they look at each other and say, "I say, old chap, it's like we're on a bit of a sticky wicket here. Would you pass the last jelly baby? And they share their sweets. So it's slightly taking the piss, lampooning that kind of British characteristic of keeping a stiff upper lip regardless, which is one of our trademarks in actual fact. Because we know in this day and age that our grandparents or great-grandparents in your cases would have seen all kinds of terrible things and they kept very quiet about it. You know, PTSD existed, it was called shell shock, so people never really spoke. And of course these days people tend to wear, you know, their concerns and anxieties on their sleeve, and that's good. It's good to share. So what I'm trying to get at is in this age, keeping a stiff upper lip regardless, you're maintaining this face when things are really going wrong is by no means the best approach. It's better to talk about any predicaments. So it's a bit of, that's how Fawcett started, though, sort of a bit of a joke on that British characteristic. We all have different characteristics which the comics and cartoons will always lampoon. I never forget Asterix. You know, Asterix, the comics were fantastic.
I loved it as a child.
Very, very incisive. And he did one Asterix in Britain, you know, when they were fighting the Romans, the British were fighting the Romans, and no one could find them at 4:30 in the afternoon, you know. They'd all stop for tea. So it's just those kind of joke things which I like. So we all have our own characteristics. And when we cannot laugh at ourselves, that's when we have a problem.
So instead of tea, it's coffee.
Well, I mean, I make coffee because that's part of the exploration thing. I went off the subject, didn't I? So why do we make coffee? Because literally next door to my factory is a coffee grinders. And because of the whole idea of exploring, we thought it might be nice to put out a coffee.
In an interview for Dapper, you said that you pretty much always made your own mustache wax. And may I ask why?
I met wax?
Mustache wax.
Yes, I've always made my moustache wax pre this becoming a business. I used to make my moustache wax literally in my kitchen. I'd make a little, you know, those little film 35mm film pots. You don't remember, I'm sure, but it's how the film used to come, and you know, and I used to make maybe 6 of those from one tin like this. It would make me six something, and they would last a year. And then the pot would get broken, or it get stinky, or get dirty, and I'd throw it away and use another one. And I was in the film industry at that point. I was a boom operator. Worked on all kinds of films, Memphis Belle, Chaplin, Billy Elliot. I mean, loads and loads. My wife's a really well-known, she's just retired now, hair and makeup artist. I mean, she worked on Sweeney Todd. She was Alan Rickman's personal. So she was like on a quite major level. And then one day she said to me, listen, you know, the wax we have at work, I mean, she got the Emmy for doing Downton Abbey. She specialised in period films and drama and so forth. She said, the stuff we've got at work is shit. Can I say that? Shit. And so can I take some to work? And that was really how it started. But what's amazing is companies grow. Sometimes they grow from nothing, and Captain Fawcett has grown from nothing. But I'm so proud to say that we still, in our little factory, make our own, all our beard and moustache products ourselves. So that's a thing. And it's my original recipe.
And you personally supervise the making?
No, because I've got recipe, because I'm so busy. There's 22 people work at Captain Fawcett now. Some of them remote, some of them actually at HQ, and 3 in the manufacturing area. I mean, they know that all of my recipes are there, so it's quite simple. There's never... Actually, there was one time they made something and they forgot to put the perfume in, or they put too much perfume in, or they used the wrong perfume. But no, there's a routine. You follow a recipe.
Is there some product you always wanted to make but never get around?
Diamonds. No, I mean, I think we're pretty well now. We're coming out with some hair powder. You know, recently, I mean, I started with the beard and moustache products, right? And that was, we did the moustache, as you know. Then the guy who started helping with the design, who's a director and an owner of the company now, his wife is an aromatherapist. So he said, you know, this beard thing, it's beginning to look like it might go somewhere. This is right at the beginning of this thing. So I think we should make some beard oil. So that was the beginning of that. Then I'm thinking, one of my lines is, fashion is a fickle friend. Nothing is forever, right? And I thought, well, the Shoreditch hipsters, I started to work with Ricky Hall. We met him in a cinema. He was virtually unknown. She's a jobbing model at that point. I thought, if these guys, they suddenly decide they're going to take the beard off, I've got a moustache and beard company, it's going to be finished. It's the end before it's done. So I thought, I'm going to make some shaving products. Then we made some shaving products. Then I thought, well, okay, let's do some shampoos. Then we went from the shampoos, and now then perfumes, of course, which are huge for Captain Fawcett. We've won a lot of awards. Then moisturisers, face scrubs. And then we went from that into hair products, you know, literally stuff, you know, pomades, hair oils, you know, tonics, sea salt sprays. So it's been a natural progression. Each product has been made, I've borrowed no money, there's been no investors. Each product has been made on the success, and not always a success, on the product before.
But you've previously said that you're not a businessman, right? Isn't that a bit of a handicap when you're running a business?
Very interesting you say that, because I've had no business training. Because I mean, somebody actually said to me not long ago, he said, "You're 66. Aren't you really a bit old to be working so hard?" And I said, well, I did fucking nothing till I was 28, right? So I'm catching up. I was a total bum. And I was actually, I always went out with really rich girls. I don't know how. And every time the girls took me home with their parents, you could just see them crying into their soup, thinking, "When the fuck she brought home this time?" You know what I mean? And one of the girls I was going out with, they had this room which was a hangover from when they were kids. It was like the kids' playroom, right? It's where they just sat and they watched their TV, and the brothers came back from university. And one guy had a Super 8 camera there. He was at Chelsea Art School. And I picked up this Super 8 camera, and it's like, Jesus, this is it. I want to make films. Yeah, I had no idea how to even use a camera. So I did a day release course in photography, except for I wasn't being released from anything. I was working at a nightclub. I was working behind the bar with people like Tim Roth. It was quite amazing. It was the place in Brixton. So anyway, I made really these 3 amateur films. It was on Super 8 in those days. And I showed them to 3 film schools, and then I got straight into film school by accident. And then I can't remember what the fucking question was. There we are. It's an age thing, right? What was the question? Have I ever been a member of the Communist Party? No. Yeah, guys, if you could see it now, I've got 3 blokes, right? They're all lovely, lovely people. They're looking beards. I'm wondering if I'm going to get out of here alive. But anyway, we're sitting here at the desk and I'm answering these questions under duress.
On the road.
I'm on the road.
Well, what's it like running a business when you're not a businessman?
Oh, when you're not a business, oh, fuck me gently. That was what the question was. Yeah. So I came out of the movie business, right? Now, and then I told you, in between movies, I used to work for this company that specialised in motorcycle travel. You know, really expensive stuff. People all over the world. From the movie industry, I learnt, because I worked with some really top actors. I mean, some major people and some idiots. I learned how, if an actor, he or she, is in character, they would say what that person would say in that given situation, right? So even if they're off script, they're in method, as it were, right? So unless the director needs some nuance, some word, some specific thing that relates to something that's happening earlier in the film or later in the film, because films are never shot, consecutively, then that's their artistic thing. So from movies, right, it's a very short step from being in character to being on brand. So if you're on brand, you're authentic. You can't go wrong. So my place, you go into my HQ, it's 9,000 square feet of my antiques. It's where the manufacturer. You go in there, you're on set. You wax your moustache, you're in character. The whole thing
is that easy for you.
Is that easy? Now business, right? And then from the motorcycle company, those guys went spectacularly bust, owing over £250,000. And from them, I learned how not to run a business, right? So I just think you've got to give everything to it. Not everything will work. You've got to build on things slowly. But then you asked me a very good question. Because last year, I thought, well, I'm going to enroll Goldman Sachs, do this thing. It's called 10,000 Small Businesses. And obviously Goldman Sachs are doing it because they can write it off. It's a slight charity. This course cost about 40 grand to go on this course, £40,000, right, to go on this course. But it's free. It's free. You just need to be at a business stage where you're ready to grow. So you can have a turnover as little as, say, £200,000 per annum up to maybe 3, 4, 5 million, whatever. So I went on this course thinking I'm going to learn something about it, because I don't really know what I've done. I don't have the training that you mentioned, so it's hilarious. So I went on this course, and the first day there was all these people there with all these notes and all these apps and all these things and all this kind of management speak, and I felt like a complete imposter, and the imposter syndrome, because I thought, fuck, how on earth has Captain Fawcett got to where it's got to today without me actually understanding how a business is put together, because I don't know. But anyway, then I realised ultimately that these people were they were learned. They were learned. It's like you go to America, you've been to the States, I'm sure you've all been to the States, you go to the bookstore, it's like how to be a businessman, rich man, poor man, rich dad, poor dad, what they don't teach you at Harvard Business School. It's all fucking bollocks, ultimately, because unless you've got an idea, then it will happen. You don't need to have an MBA or a study in business to be able to run a business. You just need to be authentic and cautious. Don't overreach yourself, but you've got to believe in yourself, ultimately. So that course I did at the beginning, I thought I shouldn't even be here. But then I realised that a lot of the people, I'm not being disrespectful, a lot of the people there didn't have that. They had some businesses, but for whatever reason they got there. But they didn't have that. I'm not saying, I had something I believe is natural, and I'm not. You set yourself up. If you become arrogant, then you can set yourself up to make a fall. And I have made mistakes, and I'm sure I will make mistakes. But I don't think you need to study business to run a business, because people can help you. If you've got to be very careful, because there's a lot of sharks out there. People want to go, oh yeah, as soon as we can do this, do that. There's a lot of idiots out there. But you can do it. You don't need any training.
Was Captain Fawcett himself a businessman?
Captain Fawcett? I can't possibly tell you too much about Captain Fawcett. As I said, he's a very difficult man. He's probably with his mother in Blackpool at present,
All right.
Yeah. But Captain Fawcett, there we are.
And was Captain also English? Are you allowed to tell us that?
Well, I think Captain Fawcett is an archetypal, exemplary, Victorian gentleman, not above a little bit of mischief, I should say.
I like that. How elaborate even is his backstory? Are you even going to write, for example, a book about him?
I think a backstory is incredibly important. Like an actor will know all about the history of the person they're portraying, how the life and everything, and afterwards where they're going to, because that means that little microcosm of their life that's recorded within that play or film is authentic, because they've got something to draw on. So there is quite genuine backstories for nearly every product we make. The Alessandro Manfredini story, for instance, or even how the beer came about. And then you don't need to even think about it. You don't need any affectation, because it's all there. So having the backstory is crucial. I mean, I believe in Captain Fawcett. I believe in him, but some people may not. He's a difficult guy to get hold of. But for me, he is a reality.
For me as well.
Yeah.
I believe in him.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Captain. I get extra pay now.
What about the future of men's cosmetics? Is there a product that the general public hasn't really picked up yet?
I think the future of men's cosmetics, I think we'll just drop the word men, because I think it's possible to do pretty much whatever you want. You've got companies like War Paint that have moved into men's makeup and stuff. But, okay, you can have blue hair, green hair. If you want to walk down the street in a dress, you're not going to have any problems these days, When I was brought up in the 60s, and I was very early punk rocker in the 70s, and I had blue hair, pink hair. I'd be stopped in the street. I'd be beaten up in some towns because I looked the way I had. I'd quite often wear mascara or nail varnish. These are things that are completely common, but there's nothing new ultimately about this. What is new is that people feel more relaxed. Before, people used to have to belong to a particular club or a tribe, or to go to particular destinations where they could express their sexuality. And even you've got to remember that even being gay was illegal until not that very many years ago. And a very close friend of mine, who is an archetypal, very camp queen, we call it, gay guy. He's very anti-pride. He's very anti-pride because he's saying, where were these huge companies who are now jumping on my bandwagon and, you know, doing M&Ms with all these different colours or no colours or whatever? Where were these companies when my friends were dying from AIDS? And I was working in nightclubs at that kind of period. So your question, I diverse because I always try. I'm long-winded. I talk a lot, but I think you ask a question and there's not a simple answer. It's not a simple yes or no. There's a reason behind something. And if you can get the fuller picture, whether people want that fuller picture or not, then you have your statement, even if it's not agreed with by some other people, it's a qualified statement. It's just not some, you know, opinion. So I think the future of men's grooming, men's cosmetics is limited. And it's limited only by people's imaginations.
Well, we talked about the topic previously, but let me take back a few steps. In the last decade, there has been a pretty big beard boom, and the men started to grow large, bushy beards.
Wow.
And it seems to me that your company almost predicted it.
Well, I can't take any answer for that because if I was any good at prediction, I would be probably down at the corner shop buying the lottery ticket for tomorrow. But anyway, I mean, I think I think with any successful business, there is an extreme amount of hard work. I think people really don't underestimate that, and they might start on something with an incredible passion, and a year later, it's a little bit less. There's an incredible amount of hard work. There's a certain amount of luck and timing. Timing is crucial. So I think we were fortuitous. There was no great prediction because it's really interesting because they kept saying that the beard thing is over, it's gone, we've reached peak beard, which is one phrase that some people were using. And they like to aggravate situations. You know, people like news and what's happening. I think what we have seen is after that, you know, boom, which was probably peak about 9-10 years ago, we have seen beards get a little bit shorter. We've seen men's hair get a bit longer, but we haven't seen, you know, I mean, there's 4 of us at this table and we've all got facial hair, you know, so I mean, the rest of my case. But I think things will change. But if you have the right products and people trust your company, then you can supply them everything that they need, whatever the state of their facial hair growth, or if they want to remove it. I mean, every so often Ricky shaves off completely, you know. So I didn't predict it, but we were lucky. We rode with it. We were one of the earliest. And now there's companies now even starting beard and moustache companies. Well, I would never call myself, or I would never say I'm a beard, you know, like Freddie Flintstone's beard company, because I think you are limiting yourself. Because then if you do shaving, well, how, you know, that's one limitation that you're putting on yourself ultimately. But I wouldn't start it now because it's bandwagon. When anything is a success, then you will get other people jumping on it, and some people who are jumping on it near the beginning will succeed. We've got many. You've got brands downstairs that have jumped on. If you get people jump on it now, guys, the market is saturated. Think of something else, for fuck's sake.
How much is the beard culture established, say, in the UK, where you're from?
I think the beard culture, it's really quite interesting because fashion tends in the older days, right? In the you know, before social media, when things are so instantaneous. And we've got to remember, I remember when the internet started. It was only 35 or something years ago. So news used to move a lot slower. So for instance, fashion invariably would start UK, Italy, sometimes the States, and it would move east. So a perfect example is when Peter the Great, you know, he visited the courts in the royal courts of the European kings and queens, and all his guys had huge beards. By that time he got to the European courts, the beard was no longer in fashion. So he went back to his court and just said, guys, I want you to shave your beards off, because they weren't particularly keen on that. So he actually taxed the beard. I don't know if you've ever seen one. There's a beard token where they actually had to produce the token if they wanted to have a beard. So fashions tend to move from the west to the east. And
Wait, was there ever a time where when the bald face was a fashionable thing?
Oh, most definitely. Yes, indeed. It came about actually in Britain. I mean, this is big stuff. And in Britain, it was compulsory to have a moustache in the army. You had to have a moustache. And they stopped that in 1917. Do you have any idea why they stopped the compulsory for a moustache?
No idea.
Because there were, let me take a wild guess, to need for new soldiers during First World War.
The situation, you're on the right track. It's because all the guys had died and they were bringing children, young boys,
they couldn't
grow facial hair. So then they dropped that requirement. So then, of course, then you got up to the 70s. So there's different times. So like the 1920s, it was very clean shaven, apart from maybe a moustache or a thin line, pen line stuff.
Clark Gable style.
Yes, yeah, Clark Gable, like small 30s, but exactly that. Facial hair was not the norm, and then of course it became the mark of somebody who was slightly out, the beatnik, or the biker, or the hippie, and the people who could have, or social worker, or people like this. So in the 60s and 70s, if you had facial hair, it meant you were generally in some way or another on the fringes or outside of society. So it meant, if you had a beard, you were, So possibly disreputable.
It's a symbol of rebellion.
Yeah, symbol of rebellion. I mean, the guys growing their hair long. I mean, you're from the States. It's really interesting. They're kind of, people having their hair forcibly cut and stuff. And it's all about, when you go to prison in the old days, they used to crop their hair or go in the army, Elvis Presley having his buzz cut. It's about, they don't want people who are different. They want people to be literally uniform. And there's a fantastic line from Jack Nicholson in Easy Riders when they're sitting around the fireplace, because you've got that archetypal film, Peter Fonda and whatever, and they're sitting there, and Jack Nicholson says, they're going to talk to you, and they're going to talk to you, and they're going to talk to you about individual freedom. But if they ever meet an individual, it frightens them. It scares the ass out of them. So
that's very well said.
Yeah.
Well, there are also quite a few cultures that specifically take pride in their beards, like Hindu or Arabic nations. Is that a viable material from European brands like yours? Viable market.
Oh yeah. Okay, so I think just going back to your previous question, the beard culture in Britain is still big, and there's still beard and moustache, and I've been to them all. I've been to them in Russia, I've been to them in the States, so there's still a beard and moustache culture. But then those people are generally making art forms, architectural things with their facial hair. I mean, and the products they will use to create that is not necessarily something that could run as a viable business. I mean, we have ambassadors. I have one ambassador who is the world champion 2 years in a row. 2 years, it's every 2 years, so 4 years, twice in a row. World champion, Captain Fawcett. We also have Fabio, who's actually the world champion beard, who actually uses our products. And I've even got a lady in Vancouver, Christine Hackman, who creates hair. She makes hair for movies and things, and she's also a Captain Fawcett ambassador. So that culture of the beard and moustache is still very, very, very much there. Now, your other question was?
If it is viable.
Oh yes, okay. No, and as you say, there's so many different cultures and creeds. I mean, where facial hair is considered, very interesting you say that. When the British troops were in Afghanistan, they weren't taken seriously by the Afghanis because they didn't have a beard, and the British Army they had to grow beards to be able to talk to the guys. So it's very important. And there are certain cultures. It's not Hindu particularly. It's Sikh, but it's also certain areas of India, particularly like the Punjab, or I've just been there, I can't remember the name of the fucking place, with beginning with R. Right, yeah. Okay, there are particular places in India like Punjab or Rajasthan where facial hair, I've got off a plane, I've been to India a lot. I've got off a plane and there's some suit got off with his little computer case and he's come off from first class and he's behind me for some reason, I don't know, going through. And the guards, you know, the customs and the security guys, they've all got fantastic moustaches. And they'll look at me and say, oh sir, what a wonderful, oh please come this way, what a wonderful moustache. And you know, and they'd start talking about facial hair and the guy behind's going fucking freaked, you know, because he's trying to get into the country. So that's really, really good. So we've just actually started importing into India because we see India as being a huge growth market. It just literally beat China in the last couple of months with the greatest population. But it's a growth economy. You know, I've seen people there in Lamborghinis and things, and it's about conspicuous wealth. We've spoken about that, and having really, really good products. I mean, there are a couple of existing Indian products, but they're not on a par with Captain Fawcett. So there are, and of course, another thing is we are hugely popular in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, specifically with the Jimmy Niggles beard oil because it's got gold flakes in it. And I mean, I don't wish to be overly, you know, generic here, but I mean, wealthy Arabs, they're not averse to a bit of gold.
It's very popular. One of my customers has a barber shop, and he has a great much clientele from people from Bulgaria.
Yeah.
And they love Jimmy Niggles beard oil.
Yeah, cool. Bulgaria, of course. I mean, Bulgaria has a lot of Russians are in Bulgaria, of course, and stuff. But I mean, there was Russians in my hotel. I mean, that's one thing. There's nothing worse than a blooming hotel buffet breakfast. It's like people moving around. It's like some kind of bizarre dance, people going from table to table. But it's a veritable melting pot of cultures and people from literally all over the world. And that's what we need, you know, that's what we need. You know, all these into politics and stuff, we've just got to stop that, because unless we actually kind of unite and can suppress some of these ridiculous... I mean, I am British, but I'm not a nationalist. You know, I'm a person of the world. I'm a biker, and being a biker, you meet good and bad people in every colour, creed and country, you know. And if you're open, then people are open. If you go like this, if you're narrow, then nothing opens. Frank Zappa said a fantastic quote. Your mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work unless it's open.
What a great note to end on.
Thank you.
Richie.
I hope I haven't been too boring.
Is it Richie or Ricky?
Richie. You call me right now. Cool. Right. My wife. Anyway, Carol, yeah.
Anyway.
Was that okay?
Yeah.
It wasn't too boring?
No.
I admire your philosophy. It's great. You're a great guy.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you for coming on our podcast. And good luck with business and the rest of your trip.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, hopefully it's some interest. I mean, you can always put an off button, can't you, on it? So we get bored.